I remember coming home and it had been this sort of secret. We'd had almost 50 people working in a tiny office on this thing for a year, and no one could even say where they were working. And I remember my then 12-year-old son saying to me, "Oh, Dad, I'm so glad to hear what you're doing. My friends and I were speculating. We thought you might have been involved in some sort of criminal thing."
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 121 of the Startup Playbook podcast. I'm your host Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they use to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. I'm delighted to have Robert Bell, the CEO of 86400, as my guest for this episode. Robert has extensive senior management experience in financial services, including CEO positions at ANZ Japan and ANZ Fiji. He is now the CEO of 86400, Australia's first smartbank, building a smarter alternative to the big four banks. Since launching a year ago, the business has more than 225,000 accounts, has more than $300 million in customer deposits, and has processed more than $1 billion in transactions. We covered a wide range of topics in this interview, including 86400's unique approach to crowdsourced product roadmaps, innovation and tech in banking, building and implementing culture, and much more. Without further ado, here's my interview with Robert Bell. Rob, welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
An absolute pleasure to join you, having listened to the podcast many times.
Thank you. So Rob, for those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Love to. 86400 is a new bank, a new digital bank. We received our license, full banking license, actually a year ago on the weekend. So it's an important time for us. But a brand new bank designed to help Australians take control of their money, built from the ground up with the latest technology, designed to help people every minute, every second of every minute, every day, and thus the name 86400.
Congratulations, first of all, on your first year anniversary. Big milestone as well. And obviously, we'll kind of touch on a lot of what you're doing with 86400 as well. But going back, you have quite an extensive background within banking itself. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, some of your roles and experiences that you've had prior to 86400?
Yeah, sure. I actually am a banker. Always been passionate about technology, but have a deep banking background. I spent almost 15 years at one of the very large banks in Australia and had some great opportunities and great learning experiences there. I was the chief of staff to John McFarlane, who was the group CEO at the time for a number of years, and had some fantastic opportunities to run the bank in the Pacific, based in beautiful Fiji. And also to live and run a bank in Japan. So some really broad experiences over that time. Then went on to run a mid-sized mutual bank here in Australia. And immediately before joining 86400, I was working for our now largest shareholder, which is Cuscal.
Fantastic. Obviously, I think there is so much that I guess can be sort of learnt from kind of corporate experience, but I'm sure that there are a few people that are listening who are probably in a similar position to what you were a few years ago. And from what I understand, you were at ANZ for about 14 and a half years as well, which is quite a significant career. What was that, I guess, decision like to take the plunge and sort of leave ANZ in terms of kind of new opportunities? Was that a difficult decision? I guess, what was that sort of instigating kind of moment or point for you that sort of made you want to look at new opportunities outside of, I guess, something that's a little bit more stable and something a bit more comfortable for you?
Look, I think almost 15 years in any organisation is quite a long time, and I'm very grateful for that time. I actually spent 5 years in the pharmaceutical industry before joining ANZ, so had to sort of convince people in banking that I could work in banking when I only ever worked in pharmaceuticals and drugs. So it was a sort of a strange time. Look, for me, it was quite easy because I had the opportunity to go and live offshore, and once I had the opportunity to run a bank in a different country, in a different culture, and to be, supported by the group, but to be very much standalone business. When I came back to Australia, running and being part of, the huge machine was just not as exciting, and it was just time for a change. So it was quite a natural transition for me to move from 86 400 to running a small mutual bank in Australia. And always sad to say goodbye to a lot of good friends, and always be grateful for the experience, but it was definitely felt like the right time to move.
And I guess when you did decide to make that move, did you have a very clear grasp of, I guess, what was next for you? Or I guess, again, do you want to sort of unpack what that sort of process looks like? I think, for a lot of people that are, again, potentially in that situation where they're sort of ready for a change, either that's with a particular business or they're just kind of ready for the next step in their career. Sometimes that kind of next path can be not as obvious. Do you want to sort of unpack what did that sort of process look like in the lead up to you sort of being involved with 86 400 as well?
Because I had a very clear path when I left ANZ. It was to do a few overseas surfing trips. I did two, one to the Maldives and one to the Mentawais in Indonesia. It was to go heli skiing in Canada, which I did, and it was to take the kids to and from school every other day in between, which I did for a number of months. So that was about as clear as the path was. I then joined a small mutual bank, which had a sort of big transformation agenda, and I got to know Cuscal through that process, because we use Cuscal to provide a lot of the back office digital transformation for that mutual bank, and then really got excited about what Cuscal was doing in digital, and joined Cuscal. Cuscal is probably a company that people are not familiar with, because it provides technology and payment solutions to about 100 different clients in Australia, many of them small challenger banks. So it's not a name people know, but it's always been sort of the forefront of helping competition. So I joined them. The original idea for 86 400 came from Cuscal, their managing director and their CIO at the time. I got involved when I had a look at, just basically a third set of eyes reviewing the business case for 86 400. And I got really excited about the idea, and so then went through a process of basically saying, "Hey, I'm interested. I'm happy to help," to actually becoming the CEO and becoming full time on 86 400.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you just touched on a little bit earlier that you just celebrated your first birthday as a bank, and I imagine that that's quite an extensive process as well, in terms of not just kind of launching, but what you've been able to achieve in the market in the first year. But again, what did those sort of early days look like from, I guess, being the third or fourth person to see that business case to actually getting something into the market?
Absolutely incredible journey to do that, and I've never enjoyed working so much as I have in the last 2.5 years. I've probably never worked as hard as I have in the last 2.5, 3 years. The 1 year birthday is actually the 1 year of receiving our full banking license. We actually started building the bank 2.5, 3 years ago. So when we actually got the license, the most exciting thing about that was not so much the actual license. It was actually the fact that we could take the product we'd already built and put it in consumers' hands. Because up until that point, for almost a year, I've been walking around with my 86 400 card. My team have been walking around their 86 400 card in the app, and we've been using it. But we had to get that license before we could actually launch that into the public. So the most exciting thing was, to step out of stealth mode and to actually be able to say, look, here's what we've got, and get people to try it and get the feedback. So that was the most exciting thing about getting that banking license. The process was incredibly thorough, as you'd expect. Banking is a regulated environment. Deposits are covered by the government's guarantee. So therefore, you'd expect APRA, the regulator, to do an enormous amount of work. And they did. They put us through the same hoops they would put a big four bank through. Even though we were a team at the time of only about 50 people, we had to meet all the documents, all the requirements, all the risks that a big four bank would.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not as simple as sort of other software businesses where you can just kind of put an MVP out in the market and sort of look for feedback. That there is quite an extensive process that's involved with putting a bank together. Really curious to know in terms of both. Again, you just touched on this, but in terms of the process to launch and being able to go out and sort of communicate what you're doing to potential customers, add them to your waiting list, and those sort of things. How do you, I guess, how did you think about when the right time was to make things public and start taking in a wait list? And also, how do you keep people engaged through that process as well to make sure that when you do go live, that they turn into customers?
But we took a slightly different view to some of the others in that we really did want to launch with a fully featured product, and we didn't want to spend a lot of time in that kind of pre-build up. So we didn't have a wait list early on. We didn't promote that. In fact, we were actually working in stealth mode for a long time. I recall when we finally said, our name is 86400 and we're going to become a bank, which is exactly 2 years ago now. I remember coming home and it had been this sort of secret. We'd had almost 50 people working in a tiny office on this thing for a year, and no one could even say where they were working. And I remember my then 12-year-old son saying to me, "Oh, Dad, I'm so glad to hear what you're doing. My friends and I were speculating. We thought you might have been involved in some sort of criminal thing because it was all top secret." So yeah, 2 years ago we came out and said yes, we're going to open a bank, and 1 year ago we did.
We kind of touched a little bit on your sort of experience with ANZ as well, but really curious to know. We have. I think things have slowly started to change on in the startup scene, but I know we've spoken about this for the last few years on the podcast of, a lot of the expectation from people that come from enterprise is that they don't quite understand startups, and there's not a lot that we can sort of learn from that experience at all. But I think that there's a lot to be learned, especially in terms of the execution and the operational side for a lot of startups in terms of what happens from an enterprise perspective. But from your perspective, what were some of the lessons or experiences that you took from ANZ or from your kind of banking experience that you've been able to apply to the way that you run 86400? And I guess on the flip side, what were some of the habits that you had to break, both for yourself or from team members?
I actually found the transition really easy because I've always been a very action-orientated leader and a very action-orientated manager. So for me, I found it absolutely refreshing to be able to, whiteboard something in the morning, execute in the afternoon, as opposed to, a big, large bank where, there'd be months and months of PowerPoint presentations and committees. And, one of the definitions of committee I like is, well-intentioned people that take good ideas up long, dark alleys to beat the out of those ideas, right? Thus to say, we have very few committees at 86400. So, what I found is that the things that I love were actually much easier in a startup because you could just get things done and you could do things. The advantages, of course, of people that have worked in big banks is you can't start a bank unless you understand banking, you have a deep understanding of banking. Execution is really, really important. That experience is really, really helpful. I think the biggest challenge for people coming from big banks into a startup is that most people in big banks have this very narrow field of expertise. And so if you're thinking about moving from, big enterprise into a startup, I think my advice would be, make sure that you're getting lots and lots and lots of broad experience at the big bank. For me, I had lots of different roles in many different businesses, in different areas, different countries, different cultures. And so that became really helpful, that experience. It's the people that become very specialist at narrow areas in big companies, I think, struggle to move. I mean, we have people approach us all the time who say things like, I'm a strategy expert. I've led this strategy team. I want to work in strategy. I'm passionate about strategy. And we go, oh, that's awesome. That's great. That's 10% of everyone's role in the team. So, tell us about how you can add the other 90% to your team.
And again, sort of really curious when you kind of think about building out your team as well is, is there one side of that you sort of lean towards? Would you rather have sort of someone with an understanding of kind of the banking background, or I guess someone who, let's say, for example, comes from startup experience and has kind of that hustle and that sort of ability to get things done, and that broader experience that you're looking for as well?
Well, look, first and foremost, if you look at our team, we're just over 100 people now. Almost half our team are either engineers, developers, UI, UX designers, technology project leads. So we are heavily skewed to technology resources as you'd expect from a fintech. If you looked at a big bank, or you look at any sort of, even medium-sized bank, they always have a technology department or innovation department. We'll never have that because that's actually who we are. And then of the other 50% of people, we do have some deep banking experience. But the way I describe it is we look for people with banking experience who are technology native. In other words, they may not be able to code, but they are passionate about what technology can do. They're open, they're curious, they're using the latest things, they're trying things. And so the entire team, top to bottom, including the board, I would describe as either from a strong technology background, digitally native, or at the very least, very digitally curious and passionate about it. So we do that. Then in terms of hiring actually people, we are looking for culture fit. We are looking for people who roll up their sleeves and get things done. I think that's the most important thing. Often we think, who's going to do that? We don't have that expertise. And, we have a little joke that, just wander into the restroom, have a look in the mirror. The expert you're looking for is yourself. You just need to jump online, do some research, reach out to some friends, reach out to your network, find the answer yourself. And it's just amazing what people can do when they have to. That just absolutely blows me away, the amount of things our team can do because they're passionate and because they're curious and because they're interested.
So kind of doing research for this interview, one thing that I found was that one of the people that had the biggest impact for you from a leadership perspective was a lady named Alana Walsh, who was your store manager at Just Jeans while you were younger. Again, really curious to know what were, I guess, some of the lessons or things that you learned or that sort of impacted the way that you think about leadership.
You've done some great research to dig that one out. Well done. Look, I've always worked. I think that's one of the things that, my parents really did well with us, is just encouraging us to work. So all sorts of crazy jobs, spent a lot of time working in retail. And as you said, worked for Just Jeans for many years, even managed a store for them when I was supposed to be studying at uni, but did that instead. Alana Walsh, and she got married, and I would love to track her down. If anyone happens to know an Alana Walsh who used to work at Just Jeans, I'd love to track her down. But look, she was a fantastic manager because she made work enjoyable. We were part-time students coming into a retail store to work long hours over the holidays, and she made it fun. But she also spent time actually coaching us, and in that context, it was coaching us how to sell clothes. And she had this great ability to make work fun, enjoyable, but also to pass on her skills and to really upskill people. So I think that's what inspired me. As one of the first great leaders I worked for. Have worked for many great leaders since then, but that always left an impression.
Unpacking that a little bit, what did she teach you specifically about sales? Obviously retail's a very sort of fast-paced environment as well. What were some of the things that you kind of took away from sales, but also from a perspective of kind of making work fun?
Look, the work fun, I think I just observed, how she went about doing that. She connected with each of the team. We celebrated success. There's not much money in retail. People weren't earning a lot of money. But we had a good day. We'd have a drink afterwards. Kind of track who was doing the best. The way she taught us to sell was actually selling herself. So she was the store manager. It was one of the biggest stores. But she would make a point each day of serving some customers and the way she went about it. So she'd talk about product. She'd talk about connecting with people. just generally making people feel good, and helping them with their clothes. So it was a long time ago, but good skills to take forward in any job, I think.
Yeah, and I think you've sort of touched on the importance of culture within 86400 and within the team as well. Whether it's some of the lessons that you picked up from Alana or otherwise, what are some of the ways that you sort of think, like, I guess, how do you define culture at 86400, and what are some of the things that you do to action those sort of cultural pieces and sort of ground the team in that as well?
We've worked really hard on culture from day one, and it's been a work in progress. I think the most important thing about culture is it's not what you write on a wall or you put on your Slack board or your Trello board. It's actually how you act and how people act. And we spend a lot of time on how the team works together as a team, how we work as individuals, common goals, and those things really kind of build that culture that you want. We've got a team that are extremely proud of the product they've built and would do anything to make it better and would do anything to help each other make that product better. And I think that's that kind of, leadership has this really long shadow. Culture is what you see people doing, not what's printed on the page, but we do spend a lot of time working through it. We use some pretty cool tools to check in and to measure. We use 15.5 as our weekly check-in. We have a regular pulse survey that goes out. We play back the results. We have a culture Slack channel. So we've got lots of little clever tools in there, but it really comes down to the people we have, the culture that we tolerate, the performance we tolerate, and what we do.
And again, you kind of touched on this with some of your experience with Alana, which is, you would all go out for a drink after work. Obviously, we're living through a very interesting time period at the moment where everything's a little bit remote. And I guess we don't sort of get the same connectivity that we used to do before in terms of being able to bring everyone into an office and being able to create that sort of same experience for everyone. How do you think about evolving the culture as kind of people are starting to work remotely, sort of moving forward? And I guess especially for new team members that might be joining the team during this particular time period as well, how do you make sure that they are already sort of part of the team and they sort of get engaged as part of the existing culture?
Yeah, we're actually really proud of the fact that in March, as an early adopter, we basically, with just 2 hours notice, moved from working in an office to working from home. We've been doing it ever since. And we're really, really pleased we're able to do that so quickly. Since then, we've really worked hard to make sure the things we do to run the business and connect people are working well. We run the business on a fortnightly cycle. Every fortnight we have a showcase where basically our technology team showcase the feature that they've built in the last 2 weeks. That's an all hands meeting. It's where the entire bank gets on a Zoom call. And we've fine-tuned that. We find that works really, really well. And we've done a whole bunch of other things to make sure people connect. Not just things we've done, we've actually run training to help people with this. Just last week, we had some Zoom training sessions with Dougal Christie Johnson from the Barefoot Coach, who's been working with the business for a number of years, on how do you perform your best at home, one. And the other sessions we were running on is how do you still connect with your teams and with your colleagues in a remote environment. And so just getting on and talking about that and talking through some of the challenges and giving people tips has really helped. Our engagement, our staff engagement and our staff NPS has actually increased over the last 3 to 4 months, as has the cadence actually of our operational deliveries. So, we think we're doing a number of things right in this environment.
So I know that NPS score is something that you track really closely. Is it true that you look at all of the NPS scores or kind of the customer feedback that comes in?
Yeah, I'm completely addicted to it. So we use Ask Nicely, which is a really cool tool, which I'm sure some of your listeners will be familiar with. Like all our metrics, as you'd expect from a digital bank, on my phone, I've got dashboards. I can see, real time, the number of customers have joined. I've been known to look at how many joined between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., which is usually about 10 to 15 customers, by the way. I can see real-time flows of deposits. It's just an incredible dashboard that we've got. And then the other thing I look at is the Ask Nicely feedback, which is our NPS score. It's just incredibly powerful to watch it. And I look at it every day. It's just part of my routine. A couple of reasons. One is it actually gives you a huge uplift when you get the positive feedback. And the other is it just sharpens the mind when people come up with feedback that you hadn't thought of or ideas you hadn't thought of. So it can be hugely uplifting, and it can absolutely, kind of hit you here when you go, we want to deliver that feature, but we're still 2 months away, or we're still 4 weeks away, or we hadn't thought of that. So I find it really useful. My Chief Product and Marketing Officer, Travis Tyler, goes a step further. He actually is in there talking to customers all the time. And I think for the first time, when he first started doing it a year ago, he had to keep on writing, "This is a real person. I am not a bot." Because people didn't believe that the Chief Product and Marketing Officer, or in fact the CEO when I do it, would respond to customers individually. So look, it's just a really powerful tool. You can't get closer than that to customers as a digital bank.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it's so easy to get sort of lost in the noise in the day-to-day that you actually remove yourself from the customers. And I really love that habit of being able to look into sort of customer feedback and NPS scores, as you mentioned, both for the uplift, but also to ensure that you have a really sort of clear line of messaging and insight. Just on that, do you have any particular examples that you can share in terms of bits of feedback or things that have come up from that process where you've been able to either change or improve things, or either sort of highlight things that you didn't realize were important for the business?
Oh, absolutely. We work really hard on prioritizing features in terms of the business. So we, fortnightly delivery cycle, prioritizing features. We've used some really sophisticated technology, research methods, MaxDiff and the Kano method to work out, what we should deliver, what will actually be the key things that people need versus what the key things will be that will delight customers. So, we've done all that, really clear roadmap. And one of the things early on we didn't plan on putting as a priority was BPay, because BPay is actually not used by younger customers. It's in decline. We figured that there are other features that we would prioritize ahead of that. And then bang, what came out in the feedback was, nope, we want BPay. And we got that wrong. And so we actually changed our priorities. And within, I think it was in 4 weeks of getting that feedback, we'd reprioritized features and we delivered BPay. And then all that noise just went away. And so it was just an example where all the research in the world didn't give us the right answer on that particular feature. And when the feedback came through loud and clear, we were able to flex and change that and deliver that. And so we've done that a few times. We actually now publish our product roadmap. It's on a Trello board. It's the same Trello board we use internally. So people can actually see what we've got coming up, and they can actually vote on it. So they can actually say which is the feature they want most coming up.
Yeah, I was about to ask, one of the things that's been really interesting from this podcast is, obviously, even though it's called the playbook, is I don't think that there is one playbook to running a business. And, often, especially when it comes to things like products, there are very different approaches of, the customers don't know what we want, so we'll create it and then we'll sort of launch it out into the market. And then there's almost your approach, which is the other side of it, which is we will let people decide and tell us, essentially from a crowdsourced way of doing that. Again, do you want to sort of talk me through how did that sort of come about, and what does that sort of process look like internally in being able to take on sort of customer feedback to kind of shift your product roadmap?
But our approach has changed over time. When we started, it was very much in secret, in stealth, and we are very different to a lot of other startups in that we launched a fully featured transaction account with most of the things you'd expect from a big bank. Really, the fact that we've got transaction accounts, savings accounts, home loans all live in the first year gives you an indication of how much we did before we even launched. So when we first started, we weren't as transparent as what we are now. The reason we went to go with the public roadmap was, A, we genuinely wanted the feedback. And B, what we found is that people are very, very understanding of us not having a feature if they know when it's coming. And so we were able to really shift the conversation with a lot of our customers by referring them to the roadmap. So, rather than having 50 people say we want this feature and us having to say, yep, 4 more weeks away, by actually pointing those people to the roadmap and then seeing it's 4 more weeks away, it really gave them a sense of confidence. And to be honest, it really keeps the entire team accountable, because when it's on the roadmap, it's public, and people absolutely hate missing it in our team. You know, our team absolutely want to deliver those features in those timeframes that we set out.
Yeah, that accountability is so important. The podcast is celebrated 4 years, and that's kind of one of the things that I mentioned in the blog post as well. Like, I think it's so important, especially when you're doing things publicly and you're setting that expectation for customers. Making sure that you kind of meet those expectations is critically important. Again, kind of just going back to you reviewing sort of the feedback that comes in as well. I can imagine as a leader, as a founder, when you see particular bits of feedback that are coming in, it can be really easy to want to react to all of the feedback that's coming in. How do you balance out, what are kind of, I guess, sort of one-off bits of feedback, or things that probably aren't things that need sort of as urgent prioritization versus other things? Is just based on the frequency of something coming in, or I guess, how do you sort of distill that feedback to make sure that you're not overall kind of underreacting to things?
Look, first of all, it's not just me looking at NPS scores that drives the feedback of the business. And I think we ticked over our 10,000th piece of feedback that we received since we started just the other day. So it's emails, it's app ratings, it's phone calls with our contact center. And then we also look at very closely what people are doing overseas in other markets. So there's an enormous amount of feedback, source material that we look at. It's not just me. And I think that's, while I'm really excited about looking at the NPS score, it's really important that I don't just jump to a conclusion with that and turn the whole business around based on that. So it's one input. It's one I take very seriously. But I'll often pass this back to the product and marketing team. And they'll often come back with, yep, Rob, we got that. Here's where it sits. This is why it sits there. This is what's more important. And being a leader, and if you hire really smart, really good people, you've got to actually trust that they've made these decisions correctly. It's the same, I've seen this before many times before with tuned in, founders and CEOs, where they found a new smart idea over here, at a conference, or they read something online and quick, do this. And I think it's a real trap. As a leader, you've got to actually let the team kind of work through what's priorities and what needs to change. And, I pride myself on doing that. So staying close to the customer, but not, completely changing direction.
Yeah. Absolutely critical to kind of have that balance. Again, sort of going back to talking about sort of building the team, you mentioned that you're at about 100 people now. How did you think about sort of prioritizing the growth of the team and sort of shaping what the structure of the team would look like internally as well? I imagine it's relatively easy when you're at 8 people, but when you're sort of at 100 and you're continuing to grow really quickly, things start breaking. How do you sort of react in terms of building and shaping that team?
Look, it's still a small team. Up until recently, we were in a lack of natural light building that was supposed to, I think, take about 50 people. And I think we had over 100 people in there. It was very, very crowded. I kind of liked it, to be honest, but it just got a bit ridiculous. And we kept on having conversations internally. Every time it came up in our pulse survey, it's a bit crowded in here, it's a bit smelly in here, we should get a new office. We always went back to the team and said, would you like a new office, or would you like another developer? And the answer always came back, we'll take another developer and keep pushing the product forward. And so, that's kind of culture. And that's, kind of how we started to build the team. I know the tech team in particular originally found it quite hard to find people that had the right tech skills, and we're spending a lot of time interviewing people face to face who turned out to not have the tech skills. And they were very, they did a really cool thing where they basically set up an online test and tool to basically check that people had the skills that they said they had. and that screened out like 90% of people. And then they only spent time with people to check culture fit rather than to check actual skill set. And that was a really big change in our tech team. The other big change that they made is when we first started, we were really concentrating on just the very senior developers. And we had some really smart people working for us. The problem with that is that if you've only got really smart people that only want to do all the really, really smart work, now we've got a much more balanced team. We've got graduates who've been with us for a year who are just incredible, doing great work. We've got people with 2 or 3 years experience, and we've got a much smaller number of, very seasoned, super smart developers and engineers. So it's a different mix in the team compared to what we started. So we've learned a lot about that.
Last week on the show, we had Simon Griffiths from Who Gives a Crap, and we were talking a little bit about innovation for his business. So, there isn't a lot of innovation that you can do with toilet paper specifically, but the way that he kind of spoke out was innovating in all of the areas around the particular business. Banking, obviously, completely different sort of industry and vertical, but banking for the most part has remained fairly, stagnant for a very long time. How do you think about innovation from a fintech, from a digital bank perspective, especially now that there's a lot more competition in this space as well, both from existing established customers, as well as new digital banks in the space as well? What or how do you sort of think about sort of innovation and sort of staying ahead of that competition? And what does that process look like for you internally?
Look, what we work on really is how do we use technology to help Australians take control of their money. That's our purpose. And so that's the checkpoint for us always is, are we actually helping Australians take control of their money? And, one example of that, I think where we've done really well, is the way we use data. So if you think about kind of banking, the best data you always had is your bank statement. And it's always been this history of the past. So you'd get a statement at the end of the month, you might look at the end of the year, and it's really hard to look through. All it really tells you is what happened. We looked at that and thought, well, that's just kind of ridiculous. Banks have all this data, and the best they can do is give you a snapshot of history of what happened. We wanted to use data to actually help people look forward. So, innovation for us is, well, okay, if we have smart algorithms look at that data, we should be able to predict what's going to happen in the future and present that to a customer. So we have a feature called Upcoming Bills, where we look at all your bank data across all your banks, because we allow you to aggregate in 86400. We then have really smart algorithms look at that data, and we predict things in the future. So we're the only bank that we're aware of that's looking at all your bank accounts and then saying to you, hey, Rohit, your Netflix bill's due to come out in 10 days' time. It's going to be $19.95 because you pay for the premium service. Your health insurance comes out in 15 days. Your gym membership, which you haven't used in 2 years, but you've still been paying each month because it comes out automatically and you don't see it, is due in 28 days. And so that's an example of where we haven't reinvented the product of banking, but we sure as hell have introduced innovation that absolutely helps people take control of their money. And so we're looking for those things. We're looking at those things. How do we use data to innovate? How do we use experience to innovate?
I think that's such an interesting kind of perspective and a way of kind of, as you said, not necessarily reinventing something, but really thinking about the application of how end customers will use the product as well. And obviously something very unique and different that as you mentioned, hasn't really kind of been done in the space before. Again, I guess one of the things I imagine working in or operating in the industry that you operate in is when you have established incumbents and a particular way of working, there is an expectation from a customer base of, these are the particular sets of features or the things that I would be able to do with the product. You mentioned BPay being an example of that. How do you sort of balance between delivering on those kind of expectations of what customers are used to versus doing, I guess, more of this forward thinking kind of thing that differentiates you in the market? You've kind of touched on sort of product roadmaps and people being able to vote on that. But how do you or the team sort of think about balancing out the two in terms of where you dedicate your resources or time, energy, and focus?
I think the key word you used there was balance. We think it's really, really important to have the basics of banking there. If you want someone to bank with us, you absolutely have to have the things that they need to do that. And for us, that's things like Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Garmin Pay, Fitbit, things like real-time payments, Osco, Pay ID, uh, BPay, being able to transfer funds, being able to set up multiple save accounts, being able to pay however you like with those accounts. Those things are all what we think are the basics, and you absolutely have to have them. And then you've got to balance that with the things that delight. Now, many of the banks around the world, the newer banks, have just started with the delight and then scrambled to try and do the basics later on. We did the hard work up front because we thought it was important. If we're going to ask people to trust us and use us, they needed those basics. The prioritization then becomes really important. We prioritize features that are the utility, in other words, are used a lot, and then we give equal weight to things that surprise and delight. So it is a balance. There's no kind of hard scientific formula for getting it right, but we're always looking about doing both and basically spending kind of half our time on both. But it does change depending on which week, which month it is.
Yeah, and it's been incredible what you've been able to achieve in just the first year of the business. So if I have the numbers correct, 225,000 accounts, over $1 billion in transactions. Obviously very incredible numbers in just 1 year of operation. How do you sort of think about growth, or how do you I guess approach growth in a very competitive landscape? In terms of just ensuring that, again, not just from a product perspective, but that you're able to effectively engage with and acquire customers as well.
Look, firstly, thank you on the on the numbers. That we are really really pleased with our first year. We've exceeded our expectations across the board, but we're also just getting started. This is just the beginning of a really important journey. People always ask me, Rob, why does Australia need another bank? My answer is always, it doesn't, if it's going to be exactly the same as all the other banks. So we are creating this really different bank. And we're just getting started. So none of us wanted to create a small niche bank. We wanted to create a bank that was a genuine competitor to the big four banks in Australia. So we spent a lot of our time thinking about how do we compete with the four largest banks in Australia. Those four banks have more than 80% market share. So it's right that that's where we focus our attention. We're very small at the moment. The good news is that you only need to take a very small market share to be profitable in this segment. But as I said, no ambition to create a small niche bank. We do want to create a genuine alternative for Australians in this market.
Fantastic. And I have had a habit recently of going well over on our interviews. And I know that you've got a hard stop at 9 o'clock. So I'm going to finish off with one last question, and we'll shift gears to audience Q&A. So again, for those of you that are tuning in live, please feel free to submit questions via the little Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. But again, Robert, I guess kind of shifting a little bit away from the business, I think for me personally, a lot of our past experiences shape who we are as people, but also kind of the decisions that we make. And, I know for me personally, one of the big things for me was, growing up, we moved around a lot. I went to 7 different schools by the time I got to year 7. And that really, I guess the changes really forced me to become comfortable with things changing and my kind of ability to sort of connect with people in shorter timeframes. But one of the things, again, that you sort of experienced in your childhood was going through, I think, Cyclone Tracy in Darwin. And I think you mentioned that you sort of lost your home at that particular, your home and your kind of possessions at that time. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that sort of experience was like and how that sort of shaped you, both from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective as well?
It's very hard to talk about Cyclone Tracy because I think I was only 3 at the time, but I think it shaped the family a lot. So I was born in Launceston, grew up in Hobart, lived in Darwin for a little while with the family, moved to Melbourne, which is sort of home up until moving overseas. So yeah, did move a lot. I mean, the big things that shaped me, I think, is the experience of working overseas. So working in the Pacific, based in Fiji for 3 years, and working in Japan for nearly 3 years. They were the big ones that really shaped me. And I went through some incredible experiences in that time, not just building and growing the businesses, but There was a military coup in Fiji. There was a liquidity crisis. There was floods in Japan. There was the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear crisis. And living through those events really gives you a unique perspective and a unique experience, particularly in very different cultures where you've got a really important role to play in the community and with teams. Those things have really helped shape my experience, given me a love of different cultures and language and how other countries operate and how businesses operate. So, I've always really enjoyed learning and challenges, and so those things have definitely shaped me.
Fantastic. All right, Rob, we're going to shift gears and move to audience Q&A. So the first question that I am going to pick is from Matthew Lawrence, who wants to know, what systems should we need in place for scaling? So I guess from a startup perspective, what are the things that you need in place to ensure that you're set up to handle sort of customer demand if, like 86400, things take off really quickly and you scale very quickly?
Yeah, sure. Look, we run the business sort of in two lenses. One is that obviously it's a regulated business, so it's very rigid in terms of the checks and controls we need to have on the business, the stress testing we need to do the business. So we meet all that those APRA requirements. In terms of actual growth, we think about growth in terms of, if we can deliver a great product, great experience, and great advocates, then growth will actually take care of itself. So we spend a lot of time on, and that's why I talked about the NPS earlier on. If we can get people loving our product and prepared to talk about it, then that really helps with growth. And we work really hard on those sort of typical viral loops that others can probably talk about better than me. But one example of that at the moment is we have a really cool product or feature running at the moment where we pay customers bills. So we encourage people to connect accounts when they join 86400. And as our random acts of kindness campaign, every month we pay over 100 bills for, every week, we pay over 100 bills for our customers who've connected accounts. It's a really cool thing because marketing campaigns always focus on finding new customers. This one focuses on customers who've already joined us. And then it's just this really amazing moment of surprise. So, people get this text saying, we're paying your Netflix bill. We've just put $19.95 in your account. And it's just like completely unheard of from a bank. But then what people do is they then share that. You'll see they share it on social, they tell friends. And so a lot of our kind of scaling efforts are around creating those type of viral loops where we surprise and delight people. It's just a very, very different approach to how a big four bank would work.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of the questions that came in were from Bryce Chi, who wanted to know any surprising effective levers for growth for 86400. So I guess outside of that specific example that you gave, any particular kind of channels or approach that have worked for you that you're able to share?
I think it's worked. A lot of our paid digital media has worked as we would expect it. So Facebook is really important to us. I think what's really surprised us is which ads actually work really well. One of our highest performing ads is actually just one of our staff members tapping their card and buying a coffee. And I think our second highest performing ads is one of our staff members just talking about the benefits. I think we filmed it ourselves. I think it took about 5 minutes, another 5 minutes of editing. We've been really surprised about what works. We run hundreds of different ads all the time and always measure them. We've got a very deep ecosystem in terms of how that all works. So that's kind of surprised us. People's willingness to share on socials has surprised us a little. Very, very popular. Our 86400 socks, our 86400 coffee cups, very, very popular.
Where can people get their hands on the swag from
86400? If they're customers and they're willing to share on socials, I'm sure we'll find you and sort them out with some swag.
Perfect.
Not cheap and nasty stuff. We do stuff. Our Frank Green coffee cups, for example, we try not to do things that kill the environment. So we do lots of quality stuff.
The next question, and I just thought it was really interesting, was from Sathak Mongo, who wanted to know, hey, Rob, I really want to work for you. Can I reach out in regards to a job? I guess more broadly, for anyone that is looking to work at 86400, what's the best way for them to reach out? And also, what are some of the things that you're looking for or roles that you're currently hiring for at the moment?
Absolutely, you're welcome to reach out directly. Probably the best way is to follow us on LinkedIn, where we do post our jobs. We do most of our recruiting directly, but I don't need the 50 people that contact me a day through LinkedIn offering to help me with digital transformation. Please believe the fact that we are a digital bank to all those tech companies out there who think they can help us with that. But yeah, look, by all means, reach out, follow us directly, and we do advertise all our roles as they come up, and we do a lot of that recruitment directly.
Next question from Anup Chaudhary, who wants to know, hi Rob, loved your insights on what 86400 is doing. Question for you, what advice do you have for moving from enterprise to a startup and ensuring sufficient cash flow to support family expenses in the early stages of the startup?
Oh, look, that's a pretty difficult one. I think if someone's moving across, then they need to accept that early stage is more risky. But I think the way to look at this is, if you're joining a digital startup, a new bank or something like this, it may not always work perfectly for you. And even if you only stay a couple of years, you are going to get experience that is going to be highly valuable in other places that you go and work. And I think, going forward, every single large enterprise is going to want experience of people who've worked in digitally led businesses. And so I would think of it more as an investment in terms of your own experience and own learning. But if you can't afford to live on whatever is being offered, then don't do it. Then work hard and save hard where you are before you make that move. It would be my advice.
Yeah, I think there's almost this kind of narrative that goes around that you need to quit your job straight away to start a startup. For the most part, you can continue sort of working full-time or part-time while you at least kind of build up enough traction so that you take some of that risk. From experience, you don't want to deal with the stress of running a startup with having the stress of trying to figure out how you're paying your bills. That's not a great position to be in. The next question that I'm going to pick out is from an anonymous attendee who wants to know, Rob, one of the biggest challenges Big Fours face currently, especially after the Royal Commission, is regulatory compliance. There have been hefty fines and rigorous punishments. Since 86400 is equally regulated and requires robust governance, how differently are you managing compliance risk?
A really, really good question. Royal Commission really shone the spotlight on many things that the Big Four banks have not been doing perfectly, and compliance is one of those. One of the things that we have as an advantage is that we haven't kind of grown into all the little different niche areas that the Big Four banks have. We're very, very focused on three things at the moment: transaction accounts, savings accounts, home loans, all of which are live. And because we focus, very narrowly on those, which by the way are about 80% of what most Australians need anyway in their financial life, it does make our whole ecosystem a lot simpler. But right from the start, we've been able to deploy some really clever risk tools and to monitor transactions. I mean, I mentioned earlier on in this interview the fact that I can see live inflows and outflows of cash into the business by the second gives you an indication of how good our risk measures are.
And the final question for this interview is from Don Corsino, who wants to know, what was the greatest challenge you've overcome and what strategy do you put in place to measure success? That's
a really big question that would require quite a bit of time. Look, I don't focus too much on the biggest challenge. There's been lots of challenges. I mean, the first challenge was standing up, getting the app released for the first time, making our first payments, getting our home loan launched for the first time, getting the banking license was definitely a big hurdle. So there's lots and lots of them. I tend to think of it in terms of what challenges do I need to overcome today? But if I can solve those, then I'll get on to solving new ones tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And before long, it's a year since you got a banking license, and you're worrying about bigger things than what you were worrying about a year ago.
On that note, Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your experience and insights. It's been fantastic. And once again, a big thank you to all of you for taking the time to tune in to this interview as well.
Been an absolute pleasure to join you. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thanks for listening to episode 121 of the Startup Playbook podcast. As always, full show notes from this interview will be available at startupplaybook.co. I'll be back at 8 a.m. next Tuesday, the 28th of July, with another live episode. And my guest for episode 122 is the founder and CEO of Everledger, Leanne Kemp. Leanne is a successful serial entrepreneur, having sold and exited a number of previous businesses. Now, alongside her role as the CEO of Everledger, she is also the chief entrepreneur in Queensland, helping to develop the state startup ecosystem, attract investment, and support job creation. I'm really looking forward to that interview and hope that you can join us. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed this interview, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.